Welcome back to Running on Ice, the coolest community in freight. I'm your host, Mary O'Connell, bringing you the latest tech updates, warehouse news, and everything happening in the cold chain world. Not only is there the coolest show in freight, but there's also Running on Ice, a newsletter that could not be colder. You can subscribe to that on freightwaves.com/runningonIce. Today, we are welcoming back the one and only Ivan Castro, head of growth at PackSafe. Welcome back to the show, Ivan.
Hey, Mary, thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation today.
I am excited because I feel like we've covered a lot of ground with you guys. Last time you were on the show, I know we chatted about your new Athena program, but this time we're kind of taking that, but going a little bit of a different direction and jumping into kind of the pharma cold chain and, some of the things that just happened there. Cause I know you guys were just at the Lodge Farm conference?
Yep, the Pharma conference over in Lyon, France this time around.
Fabulous. Well, we're going to dive into some of that, and I'm excited to get into that because shockingly, I was not at the Lodge Pharma event in France. I was just here in good old USA. But moving into that, how do you guys approach kind of taking, because one of the big things that came from it is, everybody's leveraging data and relying heavily on that. How do you guys approach like taking those data and insights and turning it into something that has tangible results, such as, making revenue improvements or cost decreases or something like that? How do you take that data and turn it into something that's actionable?
Hey, Mary, that's an important question because it was a hot topic at the conference. For us at PackSafe, what we've come to learn is that what's important is really understanding who the data is for and what they're going to do to work differently with that data. And I think knowing this is huge because oftentimes in pharma enterprises, teammates are working with pretty specific standard operating procedures on how they do their job day in and day out. So you want to have an idea of whose day you're going to modify based on the new data you're feeding them. And I'll give you an example. We were working with a pharma customer recently that recently deployed sensors and was struggling to build their own internal temperature excursion predictions. So when I showed them our excursion predictions working, I asked them the question, who do you want these alarms to go to? Now, when they looked around the room, the only person that raised their hand said, don't send them to me. And I think that's important because what's key is understanding who is going to be the recipient of the information, having clarity around what they're going to do with that information to do things in new and transformational and more cost-effective ways. In this case, taking that information and having it sent down to the most accountable person, who was a 3PL in this case, made that insight and that alarm operational. And now with that in place and the standard operating procedure in place, they're able to do that day in and day out and get value for every single one of those alarms they receive. And they're able to actually intercept those goods.
I like that they broke it down and said, okay, well, if we're going to create these alerts, we're going to create these alarms, who needs to get them? Because a lot of times the people creating those alerts aren't the ones that necessarily need it on a day-to-day. So, and the last thing somebody wants is if they manage a team that services the alerts, they don't want all those alerts clogging up their inbox. So I like that it was kind of that forethought of, okay, well, who actually needs to be the first point of contact for these alerts to do something and solve a problem before it becomes a bigger issue. And I really like that everyone's kind of, or I'm hoping that most people are kind of leaning into that and saying, okay, well, when I go to develop some new training processes, develop some new systems, implement some new technology, I'm thinking about, okay, well, what is that going to look like for the day-to-day? Because how you as a manager or an IT provider want to configure something might not be what's actually helpful for the person managing it day-to-day.
That's right, Marion. We always encourage teams to look at designing new processes that are transformational and do things by design better, cheaper, and faster. If you're going to be using new technology to do things the same way you've always done it, you're at best going to get some incremental value. But it's when you really think out of the box and you transform the process is when you start getting that exponential value. And that's the promise of all this visibility that we've been generating in the past decade.
Yeah, it's kind of I like that you guys are, I don't know, I like to think you're at the forefront of, developing these visibility tools that the cold chain and all of that desperately need. Because, there's endless visibility tools on the dry van side of things, but a cold chain is still kind of lacking. It's still trying to catch up and play catch up to, oh, this technology exists now. Well, let's twist it around and make it work for us, so that way we can move forward and have these essential tools, especially since shippers are basically begging for more information and data on the quality of their products throughout the supply chain. And I love that that's a reality coming true. So when it comes to, we've gotten this data where we've made an actionable plan. This is our new process going forward. What kind of strategies have you guys found to be the most effective in kind of adopting this user adoption of these technology platforms and saying, hey, this is actually going to help you more if you just take a couple days and learn it and work this new process in, versus, well, it works fine how it is now, why should I change it? So what kind of strategies have you guys found to be successful?
Yeah, Maria, we talked about the really honing in on the user and nailing who the user is, and that's critical. We know that. But some of the more creative approaches we've taken now are actually doing things with our customers like design thinking workshops, where we're able to get direct feedback from the actual users themselves and ask them questions like, what would you need to have from this data or this insight to make your job easier to do, that allows you to achieve your goals faster? And it makes them not only feel open to giving real transparent feedback that helps us design a product that's successful, but then what we found is that later on it drives that adoption because they feel like they've been part of actually giving input into something that will be put on them to actually execute and have an SOP wrapped around it. At PackSafe, for instance, we've been listening to our customers and the kind of feedback they have in adopting our platform. Some of the early feedback we heard were things like, we don't want to look at any technical sensor details. Recently, we've heard, I don't want to click through any dashboard. And I mentioned before that people really don't even want alerts to come to them unless they have to do something with it. So what they want is, and what we're seeing now from our customers is, what they really want is someone they could talk to, someone they can ask some specific questions about their domain and have an expert to answer that for them, which is why we've doubled down on building our conversational AI analyst, Athena, which we believe is the optimal way to engage in all this supply chain and visibility data that we generate on a daily basis.
I really like that aspect. That's something that I don't think enough people think of, is, taking that end user app like information and saying, hey, this, like, what do you want this to look like? What is this going to look like on your day to day? What's going to make it easier for you to do your job? Because I don't think ever in the history of me working in various different platforms and anything like that, that I've ever been asked, what do I want something to look like, or what would make my job easier. Instead, it was, hey, we've designed this, here you go. And I'm like, cool, well, I have to do 10 extra steps now because you guys thought this was great, and it works for you, but it doesn't work for anyone actually practically using the software. So cool, thanks for the new software, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't tell you how many times in my past career I've been part of situations where either a system has been prescribed to a team or there's a new process that has had little input. And I got to tell you, when you start asking the actual people who are doing the job day in and day out what they want and what it is they're actually are struggling with, it makes the actual product so much more adoptable and the value that comes from it faster. But then you actually get support when there are problems or challenges. You get support from those people to actually make it better instead of the resistance, like you mentioned, of counting how many new clicks you have to do. And I've remember those days of counting clicks and reducing click time.
Yeah, the amount of well, I have to do it this way because someone else designed this program and it's not actually helpful. So when it breaks, this is the workaround that I have, versus like, well, this is me just trying to fix it. And I think that that early buy-in is something that is insanely crucial, whether you're talking about getting new technology or doing, using information to make new decisions. That early buy-in at any part of a change process, I think, is probably one of the most underrated things, because if you get that buy-in early, people are more willing to help and be a part of the process through the good and the bad and all of that. So I think that that is one of the most underrated things that people need to adopt in the supply chain.
Agreed.
There's been a lot of talk in various forms, like you said, like you mentioned at the conference, and then also just kind of throughout the cold chain world in general, about risk in the supply chain. And I know that's something that we've touched on before, but I guess, how is the general consensus kind of defining and assessing risk in the like with the cold chain? Is it kind of, is there kind of a universal standard definition of what everyone's willing to acknowledge as risk?
I don't think there's a universal definition. And I tend to find that the topic of risk is pretty broad. And we might even look at just, for instance, logistics risk as a specific focus. And from PaxA's point of view, we see logistics risk in a way that we can break it up into three major buckets. We usually see the world as starting way upstream and looking at the macro level risks that might, for instance, impact your ability to get raw materials and hit your actual manufacturing forecasts. So think geopolitical delays that are going to make it hard for you to make enough stuff. Now, in the middle, we see OTIF risk. So the risk of not delivering on time, in full, and in the right condition. And this is where PackSafe plays. And the goal here is to be able to understand risk between you delivering the product and it getting to your customer, and being able to predict and prevent those risks from happening in the first place. And we do see a final pillar of risk where it's mostly associated with post issue intervention and recovery and working with local authorities to recover the goods. But if you're doing that OTIF planning in the middle right, you're going to be able to really decrease that back end intervention and recovery risk that you don't want to deal with, because it means that someone's got their hands on your goods.
I mean, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have to worry about that third leg of intervention and recovery. However, that is not the world that we live in this current world, and we'll cross that bridge someday of where that's not as prevalent of an issue. But unfortunately, the world that we live in now, it is a bit of it's a bit of a going concern on the daily basis. Have you guys seen any success kind of when it comes to mitigating and kind of deciding, okay, well, this is the risk level we're comfortable with as a company, or this is what we want to do moving forward? Have you guys seen the kind of the use of analytics and that machine learning component of it? Has that data collection had really helped people make informed decisions about the level of risk that they're willing to accept?
Yeah, it certainly has, Mary. When I think about risk traditionally, before we've had all this data and machine learning, it's risk has been traditionally limited to the amount of information that you have available, the accuracy of that information, and perhaps the creativity of your team in trying to determine the patterns and correlations within that data to generate some kind of meaningful insight and avoid an issue. Now, in the past 10 years, the granularity and the accuracy of that data has had a massive increase. Think of all the shipment information we now collect, the warehouse positioning information, the order management information, not to mention the SOPs and the contracts that enterprises collect over time. It's just massive, the amount of information that we can now digitize and make sense of. And now with machine learning, we have the ability to sift through all that noise and be able to surface just the particular trends and patterns and those complex correlations that are meaningful. Now, the challenge becomes that that's still a lot to digest. And that's why at PackSafe, we're now focusing on using AI in our Athena product to be able to create more meaningful and quick ways to mine all those insights and be able to extract the information that you need for your specific use case as quick as possible.
I feel like that has to be pretty important, especially when you're sitting there and you notice maybe, oh, the three loads I've got from, I don't know, Chicago to Jersey. I'm sitting there and I go, oh, well, two of the three got stolen and the other one, it fell out of temperature. And so if you kind of see like a repeating pattern happening on one lane, you can say, I feel like if you can turn around and kind of use that AI and say, okay, well, what's the history on this lane? Does it usually in the spring, do I usually have a couple that fall out of temperature range? Is this just normal, or is there something else going on? And I feel like, especially if you start to notice a little trend, I think you can kind of go to that AI and say, okay, well, can you find me other trends like this? Or If, I'm having problems keeping something in a temperature, okay, well, is it all packaged the same? What kind of similarities exist within these loads to figure out, okay, well, is it a packaging failure? Is it just a carrier failure? Or is it something that we're not communicating effectively and, we're losing product as a result of it?
That's right, Mary. And imagine being the individual or the team of individuals that have to sift through all the decisions, the SOP, the carrier contracts, the thermal life expectations of the packaging, when shipments should be shipped and when they shouldn't, and try to determine, well, how do we get ahead of what's happening here? It's not a human decision to make. It's really something that you need machine means to be able to generate those insights. A common example that we often see is not necessarily when things are going bad, but it's when things are going better than expected. Some of the customers that are now trending are packaging customers that sell active containers or passive containers, and they're looking for ways to try to rationalize the size of packaging so that their end customers can save money and they can reduce their CO2 usage. So sometimes they look for situations where lanes might be outperforming expectations. They're delivering it consistently faster than expected. Yet the shipper has plans in their planning system and in their warehouse management system to use additional refrigeration services and or active coolers because they expect the shipment to take X amount of days, but it's taken a lot less. So in being able to highlight to leaders not only what's the simple calculation of how long it's actually taking, but giving them the full context of seasonality, where delays are happening, where stops are, what are the routes that are moving faster than others, which are the carriers that are performing better. They're able to make holistic and more full decisions and be able to rationalize things like additional refrigeration services or reduce packaging that hits their bottom line as well as makes it a lot better from a customer experience perspective, that they don't have to deal with all that additional packaging. And again, this is all information that they might have been able to pull through a report, but these are the kind of questions that it'll be the question of today. It's not going to be the question of tomorrow. Tomorrow you're going to have a different question and insight to find. So you have to find a repeatable and scalable way to ask these questions over time and answer the question that you might be evolving that matters for you over time as well.
I think that is the probably one of the best use cases of AI that I think I've ever heard because, as someone who used to sit there and try and figure out patterns and different things that I could do to make something more efficient, me as a human trying to sift through maybe 100, maybe even just 100 loads, it's a lot. It's a lot of work to sit there. You basically spend a whole day just sitting there trying to figure out if I'm pulling the right reports, if I'm pulling the right information, if I'm asking the right questions, and then I have to spend a whole day sitting there analyzing it and figuring out, okay, I have done this is a valid trend, and it's one of those where like I waste so much time, whereas in reality, if I could just put an AI on it, I could maybe go get a cup of coffee, come back, and everything would be like my answers would be there for me, which as someone who used to sit there and try and hunt down trends, I'm really jealous that I didn't have.
Yeah, you're not kidding. I was in those same shoes as well. And so I could tell you, and you probably experienced it yourself as well, but trying to generate the insights and do all the math, it may be fun for some people, but I'll tell you, it's a lot more fun looking at all the potential options and decisions you can make and making those decisions and seeing the results. I like to tell people you could spend your time trying to generate the insights and do the math, but it's a lot more fruitful doing the actually executing on the decisions and seeing the results of them happen in on the ground.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's something that will never get old because no matter, I think if you are able to get that data faster, you can look at it and say, okay, I'm going to make this decision, or this decision. And then if you only have to spend 10 to 15 minutes, getting that data, then I can spend another hour kind of working through like, okay, if I make this decision, okay, it goes here, 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 and then I can come up with any potential pitfalls in that, and then rinse and repeat for the other ones. And then I've only spent a half a day trying to, and I make a decision on one of three very solid options versus, okay, I'm going to spend a day collecting the data, another day analyzing the data, and another day doing this. And that is exhausting. And it's 2024. We shouldn't be doing that anymore.
That's right. That's right. If you start thinking about the outcomes and the impact of the outcomes that you're making on these decisions, you start to realize that crunching the data is not where the value comes from, but it really comes from looking at all the potential options of decisions you can make and making them and seeing them happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are running out of time, but I have two questions left for you. The first one is our nice, serious question. But what do you kind of see as the next big trend for technology adoption within the pharma cold chain? Because I know that that was something that is kind of new for them, is the wide adoption of technology. So what are those new trends that are coming out that you're like, ooh, this is actually going to be really cool and exciting?
Yeah, absolutely. As you can imagine, large language models capabilities like a chat GPT were all the buzz at this Logi Pharma. What we're hearing is a lot of pharma customers are just starting to explore it. They're asking a lot of questions, exploring, and trying to find the use cases that stick for them. I think this will be one of the big trends is that there's going to be some real large language model use cases that are going to begin to stick. From a PackSafe perspective, we are already getting a lot of traction on our automated Analyst, where you can chat with Athena and have Athena sift through not only all those details like contracts and SOPs and other enterprise information, but the fundamental risk and predictions that PackSafe generates already for the industry. And we believe it's going to be a mind shift where people are going to start thinking about visibility as not buying just a sensor, but they're buying a automated analyst that's going to be able to answer any question they want after they apply sensors to their lanes and get that granular visibility.
I absolutely love that because it's kind of that's the whole like fun part of ChatGPT is I don't have to sit there and like come up with like this fancy model to cue something. I can literally just ask it like, "Hey, tell me a joke." And it's like, "Here's a joke." And you can just use your normal everyday, you don't have to be an expert in, modeling to understand, "Hey, how do I run this lane more efficiently and what are some trends that are existing with this one customer and carrier combination?" And that's where it can just sift through. You're just like you're talking to a coworker. You can just have it do everything hard for you, which to me is a win-win situation.
That's right, Mary. Many times there's someone at the enterprise who is that person that they're being asked to find this information. And it's usually their job to sift through the data and do their best to try to find something. As soon as we arm those people with Athena, they're going to be able to elevate the kind of results that they're sharing with their leadership. And the value from visibility and IoT data is going to be so much more obvious.
I 100% agree. But there is also that one person at every organization that is let me just Google that for you because someone will be like, oh, what is like, how do I do this? What do I do this? And I used to literally stare at someone and go, well, let me Google that for you as like I'm sitting there typing their question into Google and they're like, oh, I guess I could have done that. And I'm like, yeah, but now we're going to learn together and it'll be fun. So I 100% love that because now instead of let me Google that for you, give me 5 minutes and I'll have a legitimate, concrete answer with like fact, with like data that backs up this decision. And I think that is only a good thing for the future. So, that being said, we are running out of time. And since you've been on the show a few times, we know where you stand on certain issues. So, today we're going to get down into the nitty gritty. And having just come back from the food capital of the world, I feel like this is, or I'm sorry, the food capital of France, I feel like this is the perfect question for you. Ivan, if you could only eat one color of food for the rest of your life, what color would you choose?
Mary, I know which one that is. I can't go a day without having my café con leche. So it's going to be brown. And if I had coffee and coffee ice cream every day and maybe a steak, I think I would be good to go.
I like it. That is actually one of our more popular answers because it has the most variety within it. Because you've got everything from fried food to different meats to potatoes, the whole nine yards. So I do have to applaud your choices because I mean, who doesn't love a good coffee and steak?
You're not kidding. I for sure do.
All right. So if anyone wants to reach out to you about your food color choices or, maybe how Athena would work for them or even some insights into the pharma cold chain, where can they find you outside the show?
They can find me on LinkedIn as well as packsafe.com. We've got a onboarding queue for team members that want to join the queue to use Athena, and as well as a link there to book a meeting with me to learn more.
Awesome. You guys heard it here first. Ivan's DMs are open. And, he's got availability to talk to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Mary.
You can catch other episodes of Running on Ice right here on FreightWaves TV, YouTube, or anywhere else you get your podcasts like Apple Podcast and Spotify. Need more Running on Ice news? No sweat. Subscribe to the newsletter on freightwaves.com/running on ice. See you on the internet.